Welcome back to Sleepy Voyage. And if this is your first time here, welcome to this space created for quiet nights, without hurry, without demands. Many arrive here carrying the weight of a long day. Thoughts that keep turning, even when everything around has already gone quiet. This moment exists precisely for when the world seems to ask for silence. Within this story, there is a slower rhythm, a place where nothing needs to be resolved now. Just a calm presence, accompanying time until it becomes light again. Some nights ask for something familiar, a known space that remains the same even when days change. This place continues here, whenever it becomes necessary to return. And so, little by little, the night opens. The story begins in a simple way, like everything that needs no effort. The cabin stands alone on the hillside, wrapped in darkness that feels less like absence and more like presence. Snow falls without sound, each flake descending through cold air with the patience of something that has forgotten urgency. The mountain around it holds the structure in a careful grip, sheltering it from wind that moves through distant pines but never quite reaches the wooden walls. There are no other lights visible for miles. Just this single point of warmth against a vast, sleeping landscape. Through the window, firelight flickers in soft amber waves. The glow pushes against the glass, then retreats, then pushes again with the steady breathing rhythm of the flames inside. It paints the snow outside in colors that snow was never meant to hold gold. Copper, deep orange, that fades almost immediately back to white. The light moves across the wooden sill where a mug sits untouched, steam no longer rising from whatever was poured there hours ago. Someone is inside, has been for a while now. The fire they built earlier continues its work without attention, consuming split logs with quiet efficiency, asking nothing in return except to be allowed to burn. The walls are older timber, darkened by years of smoke and weather and the particular aging that happens when wood lives through countless seasons without complaint. Each plank fits against the next with slight imperfection gaps, small enough to be harmless, but large enough to prove this place was built by human hands, not machines. The grain runs in long, wandering lines that catch firelight and release it in patterns that shift with every flicker. Knots in the wood stare out like eyes that have seen everything and judge nothing. Above, the ceiling beams cross in sturdy geometry, their surfaces smoothed by time into something approaching softness. Cobwebs stretch in the corners, ancient and undisturbed, proof that some small life has made its home here alongside the occasional visitor. The stone chimney rises through the center of the room, its surface warm to the touch, radiating heat that spreads outward in slow, invisible waves. Mortar between the stones has crumbled in places, leaving small gaps that whisper when wind finds them. Though tonight the air outside is too still for even that. Near the fireplace, a chair sits at an angle that suggests it has been moved recently, positioned just close enough for warmth, but far enough back to avoid the occasional spark that leaps from burning wood. The cushion shows the depression of someone who sat there not long ago, the fabric holding the memory of weight that has since shifted elsewhere. A wool blanket drapes over one arm, its folds soft and careless, as if it had been used and then abandoned in the middle of some thought that wandered away. The fire speaks in its own language, not the roar of flames catching new fuel, but the quieter conversation of established burning, the settling of logs as they collapse into themselves, the sharp crack when sap pockets burst, the constant whisper of air being consumed. Between these sounds, there are silences that have their own weight, spaces where the room seems to hold its breath, waiting for the next small sound to give it permission to exhale. Outside, the snow continues its patient work. It has been falling since late afternoon, accumulating on branches that bend incrementally under the gathering weight. On the cabin roof, the layer grows thicker, insulating the space below, muffling what few sounds the night might carry. Against the window, flakes press briefly against the glass before melting into thin trails of water that catch firelight and turn molten for a moment before going dark again. The air inside holds a particular quality of warmth, not the aggressive heat of a fire just built, but the deeper, more settled warmth that comes from hours of steady burning. It carries density, a thickness that wraps around skin and sinks in slowly. The kind of warmth that does not announce itself, but reveals its presence through the absence of cold. Breathing it in feels like taking in something more substantial than air, something that fills the lungs and then spreads outward through the chest with gentle insistence. From somewhere in the room comes the faint scent of wood smoke, though not harsh or acrid. This is smoke that has been filtered through time and distance, mellowed into something almost sweet. Beneath it, there is the smell of old timber, the particular scent of pine and fir that have aged into permanence. Something else, too coffee perhaps, or tea, something that was brewed earlier and has left its ghost lingering in the air. The wooden floorboards creak their small protests when weight shifts across them. Not loud, not jarring, but present. Each board has its own voice, its own particular complaint or agreement with being walked upon. Some give more than others. Some hold firm. Together they create a map of sound that anyone living here would learn to read in darkness, knowing which path crosses the room most quietly and which announces every step. She stands near the window now, though she does not remember deciding to move there. The glass reflects her shape back at her, dim and wavering, more suggestion than image. Beyond her reflection, the snow continues its descent, and she watches it with the attention of someone who has temporarily forgotten what they were thinking about. Her hand rests against the window frame, fingertips touching wood that holds cold from outside but has not yet surrendered its essential warmth. She is somewhere in that stretch of years where youth has clearly passed but age has not yet arrived to claim its space. 40s, perhaps, or early 50s. The kind of age where the body still remembers what it could once do but has begun negotiating about whether it wants to do those things anymore. Her hair falls past her shoulders, uncombed, the kind of disarray that comes from not thinking about appearance for many hours. Dark, with threads of grey that catch firelight and turn silver for moments before disappearing back into shadow. She wears layers of sweater over a thermal shirt, wool socks that bunch slightly at the ankles, comfortable pants that have been worn soft by many washings. Nothing chosen for how it looks, everything chosen for how it feels. The sleeves of her sweater are pushed up to her elbows, then pulled back down again, then pushed up once more. A small repeated gesture that suggests some internal debate about temperature that has not yet reached resolution. Before coming to the window, she had touched the mug on the sill, not to lift it, not to drink, just placed her fingertips against the ceramic to test if any warmth remained. It did not. The gesture was automatic, something done without thought. The way a hand might reach out to steady itself against a wall when passing, even when there is no need for steadying. The kind of thing a person does when they have been alone long enough that small comforts become rituals performed for an audience of none. On the table behind her sits a book, opened face down to hold a place she has not returned to for over an hour. The pages press against wood, creasing slightly, though she would normally never treat a book this way. Normally she would have marked the page properly, closed it with care, set it aside with the respect given to things that carry stories. But tonight, normal habits have been set down along with so many other things that felt important somewhere else, some time before. Next to the book, a pair of glasses rests folded, lenses catching firelight in small, bright points. She has not worn them since early evening, though the book she was reading would certainly require them. Perhaps she stopped reading before the light grew too dim to continue without them. Or perhaps she found that the words were not settling into meaning the way words usually do, and putting the book aside was easier than trying to make them cooperate. The fire shifts, a log rolling slightly as the wood beneath it crumbles into ember. Small sparks rise through the chimney like reverse snow, ascending into darkness. The sound pulls her attention from the window, and she turns to look at the fireplace, watching the flames reorganize themselves around this new configuration. They find purchase quickly, wrapping around the fresh surfaces, continuing their patient consumption. She moves away from the window, crossing the room with steps that make no attempt at quiet. The floorboards announce her passage, and she lets them. There is no one to disturb here, no one to wake, no reason to move through space as if apologizing for taking up room within it. At the fireplace, she kneels, the position awkward at first until her knees settle against the worn rug that protects the floor from stray embers. The heat presses against her face, intense enough to make her eyes water slightly if she looks directly into the flames. She does not look directly. Instead, she watches the edges where fire meets wood, where transformation happens in slow, glowing increments. 2 more logs wait in the iron rack beside the hearth. She considers adding one, decides against it. The fire will last as it is for another hour at least, and there is something appealing about letting it burn down naturally, watching it make its own decisions about when to flare and when to settle. She is tired of making decisions, even small ones, even ones that matter as little as whether a fire burns bright or dim. Sitting back on her heels, she remains there longer than necessary. The heat continues its work, soaking into her skin, making the sweater feel suddenly too warm. She pulls it over her head in one motion, dropping it beside her without looking to see where it falls. The thermal shirt beneath is thin enough that the heat reaches through it easily, and she closes her eyes against the intensity, letting warmth become the only thing she needs to think about for these moments. The cabin holds her the way it has held others before. She is not the first to seek this particular isolation. The book she was reading earlier belongs to someone else, found on a shelf. Its pages marked with pencil notes in handwriting that is not hers. The blanket on the chair was already there when she arrived 3 days ago. The mug she used is one of 6 that sit in the cupboard, mismatched, collected over time by people who came and went and left small pieces of themselves behind without meaning to. 3 days. Long enough that the rhythm of being here has begun to feel normal. Short enough that she still notices things, the way afternoon light comes through the eastern window at an angle that reaches all the way to the far wall, or how the cabin settles at night with small sounds that she has learned to distinguish from each other. The knowing creak of the 3rd floorboard from the door, the particular tick of the metal chimney cap when temperature shifts, the almost sound of snow adding itself to snow outside, too quiet to actually hear but somehow present anyway. She came here because a friend offered it. A key, an address written on paper, an offhand comment about how the place just sits empty most of the time, how someone should use it. No questions about why she needed it. No suggestions about how long she should stay. Just the practical details of where to find firewood and how the stove sometimes needs encouragement to light. And then the quiet permission to disappear for a while. The word disappear had felt right when she first thought it. Not hiding, exactly. Not running, just stepping out of the constant line of sight that living requires. Being unreachable. Letting phone batteries die without rushing to charge them. Leaving messages unread without the guilt of seeing them accumulate. 3 days of being accountable to nothing except whether the fire needed tending and whether she felt like eating. She has eaten very little. Not from lack of appetite, but from the pleasant discovery that hunger can be optional when no one is around to notice. Skipped meals or judge the strangeness of eating crackers at midnight and calling it dinner. The cupboards hold staples left by previous visitors. Canned soup, rice, tea that she has been drinking without milk because she did not think to bring any, and the idea of going to a store feels impossible from this distance. Rising from her knees, she returns to the chair, folding herself into it with the particular relief that comes from settling into furniture that has learned the shape of a body through use. The cushion receives her weight without comment. She pulls the blanket across her lap, not because she is cold, but because the texture of wool against her fingertips gives her something to do with her hands. Outside, the snow continues. Inside, the fire burns. Between these two certainties, she exists in the temporary suspension of someone who has stopped moving forward and has not yet decided whether to move backward or simply remain where she is. The book on the table has been waiting for her attention since she set it down. She could reach for it now, could lift it, find her place, try again to follow whatever story it holds. But the effort of focusing on words that someone else has arranged into meaning feels larger than she can manage. Reading requires a particular kind of energy, the willingness to leave one's own thoughts and enter the thoughts of another. Tonight, her thoughts have a gravity that makes leaving them difficult, so she sits, watches the fire, lets her mind move where it wants to move without trying to direct it toward productivity or purpose. It moves backward, as it has been doing for days now, not dramatically, not in the sharp, painful way that memory sometimes ambushes. Just a gentle drift into the shape of things that used to be different. Her apartment in the city, where sound never stops. Traffic, voices, sirens, construction. The couple upstairs who argue at volumes that make walls irrelevant. Here, the silence is so complete that her own breathing seems loud, and she has caught herself holding her breath without meaning to, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. The job she left behind, not permanently, just temporarily. A leave of absence approved with the bland professionalism of HR protocols that ask no questions as long as the paperwork is properly filed. 2 weeks, maybe 3. However long it takes to feel like returning to a desk and pretending that the work matters in the ways she once believed it mattered. Meetings, emails. The performance of engagement with things that will be forgotten as soon as the next crisis arrives to replace them. She was good at it once, found satisfaction in problems solved, in projects completed, in the small victories of making things function slightly better than they had functioned before. When did that stop feeling like enough? She cannot point to a specific moment. It was more like walking up a hill so gradually that the incline only becomes noticeable when looking back and seeing how far the level ground has fallen away behind. There is someone she has not called. Someone who probably wonders where she is, whether she is all right, why she has not responded to messages that accumulate in a device that sits in another room, deliberately placed out of reach, not a partner. That ended months ago, gently, without drama, just to people realizing they had been sharing space rather than sharing lives, and having the decency to name it honestly before resentment had time to grow. No, this is a friend. The kind who shows up without asking first, who speaks the truth even when it is uncomfortable, who has known her long enough to recognize when the person she presents to the world has stopped matching the person she actually is. 3 weeks ago, they sat across from each other in a coffee shop, and the friend had said, with the kind of directness that allows no deflection, "You look like you are pretending to be yourself." The accuracy of it had been startling. Pretending to be herself. Yes, that was exactly what it felt like. Going through the motions of a life that once fit comfortably, but had become a costume worn for others. Something that could be taken off at the end of the day if only there was a private space to take it off in. But privacy in the city is something purchased at premium prices, and even then, it is not true privacy. Just smaller spaces where fewer people can observe the cracks forming. She did not know what to say in response to that observation. Still does not know. So she has not called, has not responded to the texts that arrived the first day she was here. Are you okay? And let me know you are safe, and I am here when you are ready. Kind words, deserving of response. But responding would require explaining, and she does not have explanations that make sense even to herself. How does one explain the need to stop? Just stop, not as a permanent state, but as a necessary pause. A full breath before the next step. The fire has burned lower now. The flames have shortened, becoming less dramatic, more concentrated. The heat remains, but the light is dimmed, and the room has adjusted to this new level of illumination without complaint. Shadows have deepened in the corners. The walls have drawn slightly closer. Or perhaps they have not moved at all, and it is only her perception that has shifted. The way everything shifts when artificial brightness gets subtracted and the world returns to the older language of firelight and darkness. She pulls the blanket higher, wrapping it around her shoulders now, cocooning herself in wool that smells faintly of mothballs and wood smoke and thyme. The position is comfortable in the way that being small feels comfortable, contained, held by something that asks nothing in return for the holding. Memory continues its quiet work. She is thinking now about a specific Sunday morning, 3 months ago, maybe 4. The details blur, but the feeling remains sharp. She had woken early, earlier than necessary, and had lain in bed watching light change the color of the ceiling as sun rose somewhere beyond tall buildings that blocked direct view of the horizon. It was not a sad moment, not a happy one either. Just a moment of profound disconnection from the life she was supposedly living. She had thought then, I do not know what I am doing anymore. Not the job, not the relationships, not the routines that filled days with activity but not meaning. She had lost the thread somewhere, and trying to find it again while still performing all the necessary functions of adult responsibility felt impossible. Like trying to read a map while driving. Eventually, something has to give way, and it is usually careful attention to direction that becomes the sacrifice. So she had made a different choice, given herself permission to pull over, to stop, to sit in this cabin where no one needs her to be anything except present, and even that only barely. The friend who offered this place had understood without needing explanation, had pressed the key into her palm and said simply, "Stay as long as you need," and she is staying. Not knowing yet how long the need will last, the book catches her attention again. Its presence there on the table feels like a small accusation, something she started and has not finished. Another incomplete thing in a life that seems full of things begun and abandoned halfway through. She reaches for it, not to read but to look at the cover. A photograph of a forest in fog, trees disappearing into whiteness. No text visible except the author's name printed small at the bottom. She does not remember choosing this book from the shelf. It had simply been the one her hand touched first when she decided that reading might be a good way to pass the time. The pages hold someone else's thoughts, underlined passages, notes written in margins. Yes, and important, and remember this. The handwriting is careful, deliberate, suggesting someone who took reading seriously. She wonders about them, what brought them here, whether they found what they were looking for or left, still searching, whether this cabin held them the way it is holding her now, with gentle indifference that feels more like kindness than neglect. She closes the book without reading it, sets it back down. The gesture feels significant somehow, though she could not explain why if asked. Perhaps it is the acknowledgement that she does not need to finish things right now, does not need to consume every story offered to her, can let some things remain incomplete without guilt. The mug on the windowsill still has not been retrieved. She sees it from here, silhouetted against the window where snow continues its patient accumulation. Coffee or tea. She does not remember what she poured into it, only that it was hot once and is not hot anymore, and that bringing it back to the kitchen feels like more effort than the action deserves. It can stay, a small monument to intentions that wandered away before completion. Time moves strangely here. Without schedule to section it into manageable pieces, it stretches and contracts according to its own logic. An hour can pass in what feels like minutes. Minutes can extend themselves into something approaching eternity. She has stopped checking the clock on the wall, the one that hangs above the door, its hands moving with mechanical precision through a measurement of time that has become irrelevant. Morning happens when light appears. Night happens when it does not. Everything else is just arbitrary division of continuous experience. Her body knows what time it is, in the way bodies always know the particular kind of tiredness that arrives late in the evening. The heaviness in limbs that has been building slowly and is now impossible to ignore. She should sleep. Should move from this chair to the bed in the other room. Should change into the clothes kept there for sleeping. Should perform the small rituals that mark the boundary between waking and rest. But moving requires decision, and decision requires energy she does not have. So she remains, lets the chair hold her, lets the blanket provide whatever warmth the dying fire can no longer supply, lets her eyes close halfway, not sleeping but not quite awake either, hovering in that space between where thoughts become strange and loosely connected, where the edges of consciousness blur into something that might be dreaming or might be just. The mind relaxing its usual grip on linear sense. The snow outside continues its work without her attention. The fire continues, burning itself into ember and ash. The cabin continues, standing against the cold, doing what it has done for however many years it has been here, providing shelter, asking nothing, being sufficient without being remarkable. And she continues being here, not thinking clearly anymore, not trying to solve anything, not reaching for understanding or epiphany, or any of the transformative moments that stories promise when people retreat into isolation. Just being, just sitting, just existing in this particular configuration of warmth and safety and temporary escape from the machinery of normal life. The position she is in becomes uncomfortable. Not painfully so, just enough to register as something that might benefit from adjustment. She shifts, drawing her legs up underneath her, rearranging the blanket to cover more thoroughly. The chair accepts this new arrangement without protest. Everything here seems designed to accept without protest. The furniture, the space, the silence, all of it saying yes to whatever configuration she chooses, however long she chooses to maintain it. Her neck holds tension that she only now notices. Shoulders too. The kind of tightness that accumulates slowly, building until it becomes architecture, something load-bearing that the body forgets it is carrying until specific attention gets pointed at it. She rolls her shoulders back, hearing the small pops of joints articulating, feeling muscles stretch and complain and then settle into slightly different positions that might or might not be better than the previous ones. This is not peace, exactly. Not the kind that arrives complete and obvious, announcing itself with clarity. This is something smaller, more tentative. The beginning of peace, perhaps. Or the recognition that peace might be possible if she can stay still enough, quiet enough, patient enough to let it arrive on its own schedule, rather than demanding it appear immediately. She is thinking about the friend again, the one who gave her this space, thinking about how some people know what others need before those others have figured it out themselves. How rare that is, how valuable, to be seen clearly enough that the help offered matches the help required. She will need to thank them properly when she returns. Will need to find words for what this time has given her, even though the giving is not yet complete and she does not yet know what the final shape of it will be. But that is a future concern. Right now, there is only this: the chair, the blanket, the fire burning low, the snow falling quiet, the mountain holding its breath around her, all of it conspiring toward a kind of stillness that she has not felt in longer than she can remember. The thought arrives fully formed. I am allowed to be here, not as question or hope, but as simple statement of fact. She is allowed. No one is coming to tell her otherwise. No obligation pulls her back toward the life she temporarily stepped away from. She has permission from the friend who offered the space, yes, but more importantly from herself, to occupy this pause between whatever came before and whatever comes next. The relief of it is almost physical. A weight lifting that she had stopped noticing because it had been there so long it became normal. Shoulders dropping, breath deepening, jaw unclenching from a tension so constant it had become invisible. She is allowed to be here, to sit in this chair, to let the fire burn down, to ignore the book, to leave the mug where it sits, to do nothing except breathe and wait and see what arrives when the constant motion finally stops. Time passes. How much, she does not know and does not care to know. The fire continues its slow collapse into ember. The room grows dimmer. The cold from outside begins winning small battles at the edges around the windows, near the door, in corners where heat does not quite reach. Not uncomfortable yet, just noticeable. The first whispers of what will become insistent if the fire is not fed again soon. She should add wood, should get up, should kneel by the hearth, should place new logs onto the glowing coals and watch them catch, should maintain the warmth that has been keeping the cold at bay, should take care of this small, manageable task that needs attention. She does not move, not from laziness, not from defiance, just from the simple recognition that she does not have to, that the fire will burn out if she lets it, and the cold will come in, and none of that is actually a crisis. The cold can be managed with more blankets, with heavier clothes, with retreat to the bedroom where more quilts wait on the bed. There are options, solutions, ways to stay warm even without fire. But more than that, there is something appealing about letting the fire choose its own ending, about not intervening, about witnessing the natural conclusion of something that was always going to end, whether she participated or not. The fire will burn until it runs out of fuel. She will sit here until she runs out of whatever fuel keeps her sitting. And then something else will happen. Something she does not need to plan or control or direct. The flames are very small now, more glow than actual fire. The logs have been consumed down to their essential structures, fragile architectures of ember that hold their shapes until the slightest breath disturbs them, and they collapse into ash. The light they provide is minimal, just enough to suggest shapes in the room without defining them clearly. She can barely see the mug on the windowsill anymore, can barely see the book on the table. The room is becoming abstract forms and shadows rather than specific objects. And somehow this feels right, appropriate, as if the softening of definition is exactly what the moment calls for. Her eyes are heavy now, truly heavy. Not with the restless tiredness that has been her companion for months, the kind that makes falling asleep difficult and staying asleep impossible. This is different, deeper. The kind of tiredness that comes after something has been released rather than held. The body's way of saying that effort is no longer required, that rest is permitted, that sleep, when it comes, will be the real thing rather than its anxious approximation. She lets her head fall back against the chair, lets her eyes close, does not try to get up, does not try to move toward the bed, just allows the sitting to become the resting, to become the beginning of sleep, right here in this position that is probably not ideal, but is also not so uncomfortable that her body will protest enough to wake her. The blanket holds her, the chair holds her, the cabin holds her, the mountain holds the cabin, the night holds everything. Layer after layer of holding, each one asking nothing except to be allowed to continue its patient work. Her breathing slows, deepens, becomes the steady rhythm of someone crossing the threshold between waking and sleep without fight or resistance. Just crossing because crossing is what happens next. Because the body knows what the mind sometimes forgets, that rest is not something that needs to be earned or deserved. It is simply what comes when exhaustion finally receives permission to be what it is. Outside, the snow continues falling. It has been falling all night, will probably continue into morning. The accumulation on the cabin roof grows thicker, creating a quiet that has weight, that presses down gently, that turns the space into something even more separate from the world beyond these walls. Inside, the fire breathes its last. The final glowing embers pulse once, twice, then fade into darkness that is so complete it feels almost solid. The cold begins its gradual reclamation of the room, not harsh, not aggressive, just patient, steady, knowing that it has time and that warmth, for all its appeal, is always temporary. She does not notice the dying of the light, does not feel the first touches of cold air finding their way beneath the blanket. She has already crossed into sleep, into the deep, motionless sleep of someone who has finally stopped running from something they could not name, and has discovered that stopping was the whole point all along. The cabin stands quiet around her sleeping form. The chair continues its work of holding. The blanket continues its work of warming what warmth remains. The windows reflect nothing now, nor firelight, no lamplight, just the darkness inside meeting the darkness outside in surfaces of glass that have witnessed this scene countless times before and will witness it countless times again, and the snow continues. Quiet, patient, covering the world in white that will melt when spring arrives, but for now simply accumulates, building depth upon depth, turning the landscape into something unfamiliar and soft and strangely beautiful. in its complete indifference to human concerns. She sleeps deeply, completely, without dreams that she will remember. The kind of sleep that heals without announcing what it is healing. The kind of sleep that restores without explaining what was depleted. The kind of sleep that, when morning comes and she wakes stiff and cold in the chair with grey light filtering through snow-covered windows, will leave her feeling not precisely better, but somehow more present, more real, more capable of facing whatever comes next. But that is hours away still. For now, there is only this, the sleeping woman, the cold room, the patient cabin, the falling snow. All of it held in the particular silence of deep winter night, in a place where the world has agreed, temporarily, to stop asking so much, to just be, to just exist, to just wait for morning without demanding anything of the time between. And in that waiting, in that silence, in that deep, unmonitored rest, something small but significant happens. Not transformation, not epiphany, just the tiniest shift, the kind that might not even be noticeable in the moment, but will reveal itself later in small changes of perspective, in subtle alterations of what feels possible, in the quiet recognition that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is allow themselves to stop doing and simply be. The cabin keeps its watch, the mountain keeps its watch, the snow keeps falling, and inside this shelter of wood and stone and accumulated years of other people's temporary escapes, she rests, finally, fully, without reservation or guilt or the constant background static of a mind that has forgotten how to be quiet. She rests, and the night, patient and indifferent and somehow kind in its indifference, lets her. If you found comfort in this quiet space tonight, there are many more stories like this one waiting here at Sleepy Voyage. Subscribe so this place remains ready whenever you need to return.